Welcome everybody to welcome to the first live and amplified live Q&A. First of all, I want to thank, we have a very special guest, Rachel Sellick. You're currently in Wales, correct?
Yeah, I am.
And so you are a manager, or you own Scarlet River Management, which is in Wales. It's in Wales, correct? Or is it in the UK or in London, England?
Yeah, it's registered in Cardiff, Wales. Yeah.
Okay, cool. So we've been working together here for a little bit. You've put me on to some very talented UK country musicians, and we've been working together here for like I'd say probably like the last month or so.
Yeah, sounds good.
And so I want to thank you for jumping on here and doing this live Q&A because one of the big things that we're trying to accomplish is really help musicians make sure that they're doing getting in the business the right way, and if they are looking for management, they're looking for or they're getting the right representation for them and make sure everything's kind of a fit, all that fun stuff. So I really appreciate you taking your time on this Sunday evening for you,
No,
and just kind of sitting down and talking with us.
thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Um, so let's first start off. Give us a little bit of background about yourself.
Sure. Background to me. I am actually not, my background is not in music at all. I have a degree and a master's degree in anatomy and kind of medical sciences. My full-time job is in neuroscience. I'm a research assistant at Cardiff Uni. In Wales, and I started this management company based on really like having kind of relationships and friendships with people in the country music scene. So I met a guy at Country to Country, which is our biggest country festival here in England, in the UK, and he became a really good friend of mine. I started kind of promoting him just as a kind of a favor, if I'm completely honest. It was something that neither of us really understood. So I just thought that, using the kind of the things that I knew from the science industry, I would kind of use those kind of qualifications and those kind of skills that I had and kind of implement them, transfer them into a setting in music. So that was doing all the emails and organizing events and things like that. And off the back of that, it just kind of spiraled and it was working. So we just kept doing it. And it's been about 2.5 years since that now. And so Scarlet River came about. I took on, so I managed Danny McMahon and Kelsey Govey. I see Kelsey on the live stream, so hey. And just from there, really, it's just really grown. Like, those guys are super patient with me. We're learning together. We're doing a lot of stuff, learning about how to make it work, especially in kind of lockdown when there aren't gigs available. So yeah, that's kind of background to why I'm here, really.
Awesome. And anybody that's in the stream, listening, watching, if you have questions, we will be taking questions in the comment section. So feel free to drop any questions you have. So let's kind of just jump right into it for the most part, because so what does a manager do for musicians? Like, what does a manager do?
Good question. I think a lot of stuff, a lot of things.
Okay.
Really, it's kind of managing the day to day with the artist, so working with them, finding out what works for their audiences, what works for their particular music. I think, being a manager is different for every artist. It's not one size fits all. So something that works for one artist probably might not work for another one. So it's kind of being able to kind of assess that situation, have really good relationships with your artists, be able to talk to them about things like that, not just music related, because if you have a good friendship as well, you find that things work better and they flow better. So I do things like the social media. So I work with the artist to figure out kind of how to approach social media, what content we need, whether it's video content, whether it's photography, whether it's a poll for a particular marketing strategy that we have. And then when they have music going into the studio, being kind of a support network for them whilst they're doing that, working with the producer, and then looking at release strategies. How are we going to implement doing festivals, doing gigs, doing online streaming, to kind of put everything, it's kind of the whole package, making sure that everything works together to kind of enhance what the artists themselves are already doing. It's not to replace what the artist is doing. Mm-hmm. It's to kind of amplify what they were already doing for themselves.
Gotcha. And a lot of what you touched on will kind of dive into deeper and ask specific
Mm.
questions as we kind of move on. But just just so people don't think I'm asking questions that you've already answered, but we'll kind
Oh.
of dive in deeper on a lot of some of this stuff. Um, as far as on your perspective, what do you look for in a musician that you might be interested in representing?
I think first and foremost, you have to love their music. You have to be totally invested in it because one of the biggest parts for management is to promote that artist. It's to get that artist music to a bigger audience as possible. So you have to be able to talk about their music all of the time. That's super important. A good artist manager relationship is really important. And I always look for someone that I might connect with really well. So, usually an artist might come to me or I might approach an artist and say, I'm really interested in what you're doing. I'd like to know more. And I like to know that the artist already has a vision for themselves and they're already committed to their music. Because it's really difficult for managers to come on board with someone that isn't actually super invested in what they're doing. They need to believe in themselves, and then we can believe in them with them, and push forward really. So I find, yeah, those are probably the main things really is being really invested in their music in the first place, having a really good artist manager relationship. So being getting on really well with them, feeling like you could talk all of these things through and be honest and loyal and that kind of thing. Those are
Mm,
super important for me.
yeah, awesome. And then do like social, obviously like social, do social numbers matter to you? Like authentic engagement and followings and all that stuff, and how much of an impact does that have?
For me, not so much. I know that that is really important when you're kind of like growing up, going up the food chain, so to speak. But for me, working with mainly independent artists that don't have record labels, and they're the people that I'm super passionate about. Like for me, I don't think that their numbers are necessarily that important because that's something that I could come on board with and something that I could help to kind of enhance and promote. So yeah, for me, that's not hugely important.
And for musicians that might be looking to build their social presence, what are some of the platforms from your perspective? I just kind of want to clarify that a lot of this is your perspective.
Yeah.
Um, from your perspective, what social platforms should musicians be really looking into that you find have been most successful for some of your
Mm,
musicians?
good question. I think again, it's artist specific. But the ones that have really worked for the artists I work with so far are Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and then pushing TikTok actually. And I say that because it's one of those platforms that isn't yet at the top.
Hmm.
But if you're there from the beginning and you can kind of slowly build a base around that, once it blows up, it's already there. So I think that's really important. And we're actually exploring Twitch as well at the moment, which is a gaming platform, but they've come on board there's a new company called Twitch for Musicians,
Hmm.
and the quality of the audio that comes through is really really growing. So they're the kind of platforms that I'm using at the moment and finding that they are working. So
Nice. I didn't know Twitch was. I mean, I had kind of heard that Twitch was like they were doing like virtual concerts through Twitch, like
yeah,
doing like through Minecraft or something. There had been some people doing like Minecraft concerts or something,
yeah.
but I didn't know Twitch had opened up Twitch for musicians. So that's interesting. I'll definitely have to look into that.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah, it's fun. It's not one that I'd heard of either.
yeah.
But Danny went to Pennsylvania in February, and he came back to me and he was like, "Oh, I had this kind of seminar on Twitch for musicians by the lady that's organizing and running the whole program, and said that it was something that we should really look into." So we've started to, and we're starting to kind of push that forward. And Danny, yes, I've pushed Danny to get onto TikTok.
Nice.
So,
Yeah, TikTok is definitely something we're looking into, but I haven't quite figured out the magic potion behind it because
no.
it seems like the simpler the production, the more they respond to it. So like I'll put our live videos up or our live performance videos up, and they do all right. But if it's like just something of me on my cell phone talking about something, those numbers do way better. So I'm trying to figure
Yeah.
out TikTok.
It's the same with all social media platforms. It's about finding trends, and it's an art in itself, finding the trends that are kind of growing at that particular point and getting on board with them really quickly, and then getting content out. Because then people are super interested in what you're doing and they're already looking for that content. But yeah, it's a very new platform for me as well. I'm trying to figure it out myself.
Nice. Um, so what's what's your opinions on LinkedIn for musicians?
I think it's one of those platforms that's really good for professional relationships.
Mm,
So like as a professional, my I've got my own personal LinkedIn. The artists I work with have LinkedIn too,
mm,
and I find that it's really good for working, finding people in the industry. So
mm.
it's not really a fan-based platform. It's more for finding those relationships with potential like booking agents and labels and people like that. I think that's kind of where it is good to have it. And I think it's really important that it's always up to date, because
Yeah,
you just never know who's going to kind of drop by.
absolutely. And one thing that I found, at least for us on our end, as it's been really good for finding potential sponsors
Yeah,
because
definitely.
when I first started using LinkedIn, specific like because I've always had a LinkedIn back when they first started, and it was literally just a job resume site.
Yeah.
And then I started incorporating the live and amplified stuff, and I realized that I could go like so. There's different companies we like working with, and I found that I can go search those companies and add people that work for them.
Yeah.
So I slowly started doing that with one company, MXO, which is the microphones that we love to use. And so I'd slowly started adding people, and I was posting our content regularly. And just by chance, their director of marketing saw it and was like, "Hey, really love what you're doing. Let's talk," you know. And so that's kind of it. Hasn't really resulted into anything official, but like we're having the conversation and we're building that relationship. So that's really cool.
Yeah, 100%. I definitely agree. That's kind of where it's a good platform for that, definitely for making those connections, especially as a manager. That's something that I'm looking to do, is finding other companies to connect with and make established relationships with, and then as you see off the back of that, potential sponsorship and working together and programming that.
Awesome. And so we're going to kind of switch gears a little bit. From the musician's perspective, what should, when they're sitting down to, they're ready, they feel like they're ready to start looking for representation or management, what should they really be looking for as far as a manager goes?
Okay. I think that they need to know what they want, what are their visions, what are their goals, and then looking for managers that they think would be able to give that to them. And I think it's really important because it's not about going to the top and finding, the best manager that's working with the most successful artist, because yes, they might be able to make that artist successful, but it might be because of the music that they produce. Finding, working with, I don't know, somebody's manager who's in the rock scene, for example, is not going to be the right manager for you if you're producing pop or country music. So that's one thing that's really important, finding those people that are really invested in the type of music that you do, potentially in the right location as well. I mean, managers don't have to be in the same location, but you need to know that, if you're pushing to a particular audience, that they have access to that audience as well. And somebody they're going to get on with, it's okay to go and meet people and think that you don't click with them and you don't gel with them, from an artist perspective and a manager's perspective, I think.
Gotcha. And we're going to go to our first audience member question from Amberly. Do you think artists should pay management monthly or should they take a percentage or both?
Okay. I don't think that they should pay for management personally. I do think that from a manager's perspective, you take percentage revenue on something that you are able to give the artist. I do run a monthly program as well, but that's not for management, that's for other aspects. So potential press releases or marketing, social media, things like that. But that's not, that isn't purely management. So I don't think that, from my perspective,
Hmm,
I wouldn't ask an artist to pay for my management services. No.
gotcha. Perfect. Um, and is that kind of how you can tell? the difference between an authentic management offer versus like a scam? Because I, at least on the TV and film aspect, there are a lot of people that will offer you the gotcha contracts and they'll own you for like ever. But is that kind of how you can tell the difference between an authentic or management offer versus a scam, or what's kind of?
I think that's a really difficult one to answer because I think, if you were approached by a really big manager
Hmm.
who felt that in the future they could manage you and take percentage, but at that particular time they just want to help invest in you,
Hmm.
and then they might have something else to offer, and an artist might go for that, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Because I know that for example, the guy that used to manage Taylor Swift, Rick Barker, he runs his own kind of artist management programs and webinars and things like that, which you can pay for. And I'm sure that, and I've been a part of a couple of them and found them really useful from a manager's perspective.
Mm-hmm.
And I know that if any artist took part in that, they'd find a lot of benefit in that too. But for someone like me, who's quite an independent manager and new at this, then if I approached an artist and asked them to pay for my management services, I don't
Yeah.
think that's fair. I don't think
Oh,
that's fair. So
gotcha. And just to kind of piggyback off of that, a little bit, is there a way that you can kind of tell the difference between a scam and an authentic offer? Or
I don't know. I
uh,
mean, I haven't seen that. I
okay,
haven't seen any scams, which I guess is a really good thing.
yeah,
But I would hope that it would be quite obvious. And I think that once you delve deeper, it's really important to look at the credentials and see, if you find their brand, find their website, their Facebook, all their socials, have a gander, maybe even, comments, find some of the artists that they're working with and ask them what they think, before moving on and moving forward. So I think if there was something really kind of uncertain, then hopefully you would find it for sure.
gotcha. Um, and perfect. It's just I've been involved in some scams, so I kind of know that that's a thing that exists out there. It's like people offering you like a distribution service, but
Yeah.
they're taking like 95% of your money because, so I figured I'd just throw it out there. For a musician that's start getting ready to start looking for representation or management, what should they start working on now to make themselves more appealing?
I always say that a good online social media presence is really important, especially in today's age, especially because of the corona and the coronavirus and lockdown. Everyone is on social media, a lot more than usual. So I think this is actually a perfect time if you're a new artist to get yourself out there, to find new platforms, to find new companies to kind of partner with and ask to be on their live streams, because that's great. There's so many companies in the UK, and I'm sure there are where you are as well, that are having artists on their Instagrams, doing takeovers, doing Facebook interviews, like we are now, like
Mm-hmm.
you've done with the artists I work with. So I think that's really important, and I think it will be. I think when this is over, there'll be a lot of artists coming out of the woodworks that we didn't necessarily know before,
Mm-hmm.
because they've really put their heart and soul into this period of time.
Yeah.
So definitely doing that, working on your original material, working on getting a really good recording of it. It's okay. I think it's better almost if you take a little bit more time to invest in your music, and invest in the recordings and make sure that it's really good.
Yeah.
So that when it goes out there, it goes out to a really good audience. You're really proud of it as well. So things like that, the motivation and the passion for what you're doing, that's
Mm.
really important.
Yeah. And that they should be almost doubling down on their music right now because they have the time or have
Yeah,
more
I
time.
mean, yeah, I mean, Danny and Kelsey have been doing a lot of co-writing with people that they wouldn't ordinarily have the time to co-write with, and they've been great, artists from all over the place that we've made connections with, from Canada and into Europe and Norway, in the US as well. And I think this is a great time to do it because everyone's a lot more free, so it's easier to organize. And you have no idea what's going to come out of that. It
Mhm.
could be the next big song. Who knows?
Yeah. And it's one of those things where I've told a few different people and we've had this conversation. I think after this pandemic kind of clears and things go back to start getting back to normal, um, I think we're going to see another renaissance because we're like, as far as like an art renaissance, because we've had all these musicians that have been just kind of working, not being able to not all of them have their own home studios or access to a studio, so they've been kind of quietly working on new projects. And once things start to open back up and they can get back into the studio, we're going to just see this massive influx of new music, which is really exciting for me. So it's it, and I'm sure we're going to start seeing people start garnering some attention, looking for management, which kind of spawned the idea of doing this because I haven't really seen a lot of live Q and A's with with management. So that's kind of how all this came together.
Yeah, for sure. No, that sounds great. And I think you're right. And as a manager, that's something that you would kind of be looking for, I guess, after this period of time to see that an artist has really taken this time to invest in what they're doing.
Mm,
So yeah, I'm really excited for all the new music that will come out for sure.
absolutely. And then kind of staying on the social media topic, can you tell if somebody has bought their following versus organically built it?
I think so. Yeah, I do. And the reason I say that is because it's really important to look at the engagement. So actually, if someone has less followers and less likes, for example, but the engagement is really good, then surely you can tell that that artist has invested the time into their fans and their audience to make them feel connected, and as a result they've stayed on board and followed the journey of the artist. Whereas it's very obvious if you can see that a page has 10-12,000 likes but is getting like 2 posts and 2 interactions on every post that they do. Same for Spotify as well. You can kind of get a little inkling into some of where people have paid for non-organic things. And speaking to other managers and speaking to promoters as well, through the Music Managers Forum, who are a great managers kind of connection. They were, a lot of the kind of general consensus is that if an artist has less followers but is really driving the engagement, then that is kind of more preferable than having 10-20,000 with no engagement.
Awesome. And so I guess like one of the big questions that I've had, it's been kind of sitting in the back of my head, is having management for every musician.
Mm-hmm. Can
Uh,
you say that again? Sorry.
oh, sorry. Is having a manager for every musician? Does every musician need a manager?
I think that's up to the artist to make that kind of distinctive choice.
Hmm.
I know, loads of artists who are doing incredibly well for themselves and don't have management. They've done it all themselves. So I think it depends on the individual, what the individual wants, whether they feel that it's something that they can do themselves and invest all the time and then they don't need one. So yeah, I think it's each artist to make that executive decision.
Cool. And then from your perspective again, what's the difference between like good management and bad management?
You might want to ask Danny and Kelsey to answer that question. Um, I think a good manager is kind of, I hope, is someone that possesses those qualities that we've already kind of spoken about.
Yeah.
So, investing in the artist's career, investing in their journey, investing in them as an individual and the music that they produce. Being willing to go the extra mile for them, but willing to listen to them as well. So, if they have an idea that wasn't yours, okay, cool. Like it's gonna work. They know their audience just as well as you do. So I think those are really important qualities. Patience is very important, and I'm learning that all the time. Especially we all have different schedules, we're all doing different things. So being patient, being kind, being loyal, being passionate, I think those are really good. As a manager, you don't want to take over. And I think that's probably one that's a little bit more negative. So,
Mm.
it's the artist should drive what they want, and what the success that they want. And the manager should be on board with that. The manager shouldn't be taking an artist in a direction the artist doesn't want to go in, if that
Mm.
kind of makes sense.
Yeah, no, that makes perfect
Yeah.
sense. And it how because I think one of the things that we probably should go over a little bit that a lot of people don't think about is that there are different types of managers. So you have like your manager that manages your music, your thing, and then like if you're touring, sometimes you'll have like a tour
Yeah.
manager. Can you kind of break down the different managers that one act might have and the importance of all of them working together and
Sure.
playing?
Well, I
Yeah.
think from my kind of experience, a tour manager is someone that comes on board with, as the name suggests, the touring
Hmm.
aspect of things, and so making sure that all the venues and every tour date goes as well as it should, it runs as smoothly as it should, making sure everything's on time, everything is working correctly and in working order. And the manager is the one that then deals with the artists themselves and everything like that. I think it's really difficult to kind of, for me, it's difficult to kind of put one in one category and one in another, because I think that for me at the moment I've just been working with the artist kind of on both.
Mm-hmm.
So we don't have a separate tour manager.
Okay.
Um, so I'm sure that, there's probably different understandings of both of those, and I wouldn't want to say something that was incorrect.
Yeah. No, I
So
understood.
yeah,
So
that's kind
it's
of the main distinction, I guess.
so especially on the independent level, it's not uncommon for your manager to also be your tour manager to kind of fill multiple roles. It,
No, I don't think so. That's what I've done, and that's what other artist managers that I know have done too. So traveling around the country with them and making sure that the venues and the hire fees and the ticket sales and the schedule and everything, from that check-in to the venue, but also before that. So the radio interviews and things that come before too. Yeah.
Wonderful. And just kind of throwing it out there as a reminder, if anybody has any questions, feel free to throw them in the comments below. Because I know Nathan asked if I had pre-ordered Kelsey's new single. I have not yet, but I will.
But you
So
will, yeah.
yeah, but I will. Um, so like obviously with the pandemic kind of going on right now, it's thrown everything up in the air.
Yeah.
So I kind of want to focus on that a little bit, even though we've really been talking about it quite throughout the entire thing, through the entire Q&A. But what are some things that musicians should be focusing on right now to prepare for life after the pandemic?
Good question. I think it's really important to just it's a really good time actually to center yourself as an individual and an artist and discover what you really want to get out of this year. I think that's really important, and that's not just from the music perspective, but as you as an artist and your kind of overall career goals, and the journey that you want to go on. So for me, the artists that I'm working with, is just working with them a little bit more closely than usual, actually, and speaking to them, on a daily basis, doing weekly calls, just setting them up and working through. Thankfully for us, both Danny and Kelsey had recorded music prior to lockdown, so we were really lucky that we could focus on getting that out there and doing the best we could in terms of like promoting it. And hopefully, fingers crossed that works, and what we decided to do, got out to people. So that was, doing things like lyric videos and official music videos, and finding other avenues, doing live streams, doing more radio interviews over the phone, doing Zoom calls, doing co-writes. So yeah, just filling up your time, but knowing, centering yourself as an artist and figuring out what is it that you want to achieve. And it's very difficult, obviously, at this time to say what you want to do in the next 2-3 months, because
Mm-hmm.
we don't know if we're going to be able to do shows in 2 to 3 months.
Yeah.
So that's really difficult. So having an open mind as well about the situation, and not getting downhearted by it, because it's going to be okay. We're going to get through it, and we're going to support each other through it. So
Absolutely. And something that we've kind of started diving into as we've relaunched our website and found that we have the ability to do like a digital magazine through our website through the provider that we use. Um, how from how much experience do you have with like organizing like single reviews and album reviews, and like what's the importance of that for musicians?
yeah, so I do that through the press release and kind of during the promotional period. So usually when the song goes on to pre-order and we have a pre-save link, for example, I'll start approaching people that I have already made connections with, and then other people that I think would really appreciate the music. So it's about looking at, there are definitely certain companies that always get on board, and I'm so thankful for that. I have some really good friends in the industry who are always willing to do reviews and interviews and promote the music that the artists out of Scarlet River and Puzzlemaker produce, which is great. But then also, thinking about the song itself, if it's a more upbeat pop country kind of modern style, then are there certain companies that might go for it? If it's a more downbeat, classic country song with a big meaning, or especially during this time, can we push it out there to help people in terms of like mental health? Can we promote that? Can we kind of make awareness for things like that for the NHS, for example? So finding those companies that might get on board with that particular song as well. So I think, I have lots of lists. I'm a very list orientated person. So I just have lots of lists around everywhere on pieces of paper in my Google Drive. And I just kind of go through those and just see, for this particular song and for this artist, what works. And I spend a bit of time, doing some research around the topic and getting in contact with new people that might like to be on board, like yourself. And going, and doing that. So in terms of PR and promotion, that's kind of what I go through.
Nice. It's great to talk to somebody else that's very list oriented, because
So
ever since I was a little
oriented.
kid, it's like I got to list everything out. Like even on my phone, like on the notes app, it's
Yeah.
just like pages and pages of nonsensical lists. And it's like, oh, I made that for this one thing that I was trying to accomplish 7 years ago. I don't need this anymore, but it's still, it's still sitting there.
I am exactly the same, and it's a blessing and a curse, because sometimes I look at my lists and I'm like, oh my goodness, they are way too long,
Yeah.
and that can be quite downheartening in itself. But I definitely agree. I have so many notes in my phone of one-liners, things I need to do, or 10 lines. It's cool. Whatever works for you, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. And I've been really trying to figure out a way to organize that, like the list aspect, just so it makes more sense. And yeah, it always ends up just being this long run-on list of yeah.
I like the
Um.
bullet points, so you can tick them off when you've done
Oh yeah, yeah.
them.
I should probably start doing that because yeah. Um. And so you mentioned like doing traditional radio interviews. Is that something that's still, or from your perspective, is that still an effective promotional tool, or is it
Yeah,
more
well,
podcasts and
I think it's a bit of both,
okay.
because I think it's really cool to get to grab listeners' attention when they are, when they've tuned into a radio station that they ordinarily would tune into, and then having the opportunity to listen to some new music, but also allowing the artist to speak about where the song came from and the story behind it and a little bit about themselves. So I think that's quite a nice one. And then the podcasts are kind of for getting in more in depth about, life and the music industry and the artists themselves and their journeys, and not just this song, but what's come
Mm,
before, what the long-term plan is. And I think it's really nice to have both of those, because
mm,
then a fan can decide what they're looking for and what they would like to listen to. So if they like an artist, then they might go and listen to the podcast. But if they're new to the artist, then a radio interview is a really nice introduction and a summary of what the
mhm.
artist is about.
Yeah. And that's one thing that I've learned doing the podcast is I really like the aspect of being able to sit down and dive deeper into who the musician is, not
Yeah, for sure.
necessarily just promoting the song, but like taking 15, 20 minutes. And it's like, oh, hey, like when I was interviewing Charlotte the other day, we found out that we both have love crime or true crime stories, like, just all that stuff. And so we ran on a good little ramble about that. So, it was being able to do that is always exciting,
Yeah,
and getting
definitely. So,
so. Um, but that's pretty much all the questions that I had as far as like pre-prepared stuff. So if anybody else has any questions as we start wrapping this up, because I know it's a little bit later for you, it's midday for me, so it doesn't really matter. But what's one thing? Or first of all, tell us a little bit more about your management company and what you offer musicians. Let's
cool.
drive that home.
Okay, yeah, sure. So Scarlet River Management is a UK-based artist management company that specializes predominantly in modern country. So I work with artists in a managerial capacity, but also in terms of like live bookings and third-party representation, and then also social media and promotion as well. So there are, different aspects depending on what the artist needs, because I think it's really one focus for me, and one thing I find really important is making sure that the artist feels like they're getting what they're paying for, if it's something like social media and marketing, but also in terms of management, that they have someone that's on board and gonna push the focus of what their career goals and what they want to achieve is. So I think that's really important, and that's something that Scarlet River is gonna hold true. That's the point. Why did you call it Scarlet River? That's, to be honest, I'm gonna tell you a really stupid story.
Okay.
I to be honest, um I love the name Scarlet. I felt like it was being a woman, it was quite a female sounding name. It's quite a fierce color too. And I can be quite fierce sometimes. When it comes to that, in terms of like, I like to get things done and I like to be on point with a lot of stuff. So that's where Scarlet came from. And then when I put that forward, I was brewing on Scarlet Management and it didn't quite sound right. It needed a second name. It
Mm-hmm.
needed like a second word in to drive
Yeah.
that. And all credit to Danny McMahon. He went, I think it should be Scarlet River. And I was like, yeah, I like that. So that's genuinely where it came from. I wish there was a better story behind that and
Yeah.
why it was Scarlet River, but I love it. I'm so passionate about that name. I love it. And when I went to think about the logo as well, like the color schemes that you can incorporate into that, just the whole branding
Yeah.
from it. So that's kind of where that came from. Yeah, I hope that
Perfect.
kind of answers your question. Sorry if it's not that exciting. But
Uh,
yeah, so that's what Scarlet River does. And we just want to help the artists. I'm so passionate about making sure that the artist gets everything that they want
mhm.
from anything that we help them to do, whether that's promoting one single, whether that's working in a management capacity, long term, whatever it may be.
Mhm.
I'm always looking to make connections with other people because that will benefit the artist as well. It's really important, to have connections with people and to have a good support network, because you can't do it on your own.
Yeah,
You just can't. So I think that's really important.
absolutely. Let's see. Hold on. In your opinion, what UK town cities have you found have had some of the best music scenes to look to try and get a gig in?
Mm-hmm. Okay, so in terms of country, at the moment, I would say Manchester and London are
Okay.
the two to kind of look for.
Okay.
However, there's a huge scene opening up in Scotland, and playing in Scotland is awesome. I was really lucky. I put together a 3-day tour called Make Mine Country to promote the different aspects of country music in the
Mhm.
UK. So we had like a Celtic folk artist, a traditional artist, a country pop artist, and we did a few tour dates. And we went to Scotland, and they had some of the best people in terms of fans. The way they get behind the artist is incredible. So Scotland is great. Birmingham's also a really good one. Scott, Charlotte, get on that. And so that's really cool. And then one of the great things that Scarlet River is trying to do, and one thing that we want to do, is to try and promote Bristol and Cardiff as 2 new hubs,
Mm.
if we can. So we're
Yeah.
looking to kind of work with companies, radio stations, and people from those areas too, so that we can help introduce country artists to other areas of the globe, of the country, of
Mm.
new cities. So yeah, that's where we're working towards at the moment.
Awesome. And then something that my buddy just texted me about, and it's kind of something that we can go into here a little bit. Um, do you how important is it to or well obviously it's important, but do you offer any services to make sure that musicians are like legally compliant with government, like as far as like taxes or like whatever any of that stuff may be over in the UK? Because I know like over here in the US you have to file certain paperwork, all that fun stuff.
Sure. So yeah, we make sure that I work really closely with Puzzle Maker Studios, and we have a great lawyer that we work with super closely to make sure that all of those things are in check and in order, and that we work, as you say, legally, and everything is working correctly.
Yeah.
And so yeah, I'm really thankful to have a good kind of support network around me when it comes to things like that, for sure. We want more in Wales. Yes, we do, Craig. I completely agree with that. And SW Country, who are a new country radio show in Cardiff. We're going to be hopefully working with them to kind of bring some new stuff to Wales. And Nathan, it's Paris Pretty, definitely, not Portsmouth. Sorry.
Yeah. And then as far like staying on the legal aspect of things, how important is it to make sure that people are copywriting their music, and like what's that process that
Yeah,
you
it's super important, because the last thing that you want to do as an artist is not have all of that in place, and then find yourself in really sticky situations. When I was at a managers conference last year, I believe, they said that it's really important, even if it's just, especially when you go into like co-writing and things like that, that you just have a piece of paper that just says, whatever comes out of this, it's a 50-50 split, or whatever you decide. And things like that sound so simple, and that you don't necessarily think about as the first thing when you go in. Some of those things can be fundamental, and especially when that song might actually end up somewhere in the pocket of a number one artist, or somebody that's with a record label, just simple things like that. But the great thing about working with Puzzle Maker again is that they have an artist development program, and all of that comes into that. So yeah, I think that that's super important, to make sure that you've got all of that behind you, and the right people can guide you towards that. You don't have to have all the answers. That's what people, there's always somebody that you can go to.
Yeah. And it doesn't have to be a big drawn out thing. It could just be something as simple as we agree to this, and it that like I mean, as far as being legally binding aspect, it doesn't have to be a big drawn out 20-page contract. It could be a 1-page thing, just as long as you have like a lawyer or something look over it and say, yeah, this will hold up.
Yeah, exactly. And whatever you're comfortable with, for sure.
Mm.
Just take a look through it, take your time, especially when it comes to, especially with some contracts, especially if you're looking at like management or record labels and things like that. It's really important to make sure that you are 100% on board with it too. You don't have to be pressured into doing something that you don't want to do.
Mm-hmm. And as far as like record labels go, is that something the musician should be actively involved with, or is that more of a management? Like, how does that kind of work?
It's a really interesting one, because some artists don't want record labels, and some do. So at the moment, the things that record labels used to do many years ago, we're finding that the artists and the managers need to do first before we can get up to the kind of record label standards. So that's probably not the case all of the time, for sure. But people that I've spoken to in Nashville, when we went a couple of years ago, and did some writing with a great guy called Billy Smiley, and we were talking to him about things like that, and he was saying, record labels nowadays want to see that you're investing financially, and in terms of time, yourself first. And then a record label might decide to come on board because they've seen that you've put in all of that effort yourself. So again, it's one of those things dependent on whether an artist wants it or not. If an artist wants to strive for that, then your strategy might be slightly different. But if you don't, then that's okay too.
Cool. Yeah, because I mean, a lot of, like you had mentioned, a lot of the stuff that the record labels used to do,
Yeah.
a lot of musicians and a good management team could probably get 90% of it done themselves. So
Yeah, for
that's
sure.
yeah. Um, so other than that, is there anything else that you feel like musicians should know? Well, actually, we'll go into like more basic questions that I ask a lot of the musicians. What advice do you have for younger musicians that are just starting out?
Okay, so it's really important to stay true to who you are. I think that, I've seen way too many a time people who, are of authority, so to speak, think that they can influence a younger musician's direction. And maybe they can, but for me, that's not what it's about. It's about coming on board with the artist vision and the goal and helping them to succeed. And as a young artist, definitely stay true to who you are. You know, enjoy the experience first and foremost as well, because it's not something that you need to jump into in the deep end like straight away. You can take your time. You've got the time as a young musician to write original music, find out the sound that you love, find out what who do you want to be, basically, who do you want to be, and then find the people to surround you and love you and guide you and support you into doing that.
Absolutely, absolutely. I think that's a perfect way to state it. And then the other thing that we like to do, or one thing that I've been talking to one of our writers that she does a lot of our digital magazine articles. And one thing that we're working on right now is how to manage your time effectively when you're in studio.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have any perspective on that or any advice on how to properly make sure you're getting the most out of,
Sure.
like, yeah, the most out of your studio time?
In terms of studio time, it's important to make sure you're working with the right studio first. So, if you need to go and do some research and meet up with a couple of studios, take a look around, see what they can offer you, that's cool. I think that's a really important thing to do, because the person that invested in, you're going to invest in them financially to create your product, and that product's going to be out there for a very long time. Sometimes, is going to surpass when you stop being an artist, in 50, 100 years time. So it's really important that you make sure that that what you are creating and the studio that you get behind is going to be on board with that. So that's really important. And then in terms of being in the studio, if you found the right people, then I think you will work effectively, which will then potentially mean you work a little bit faster, that you're all on the same page, so you're not fumbling around for different ideas. You kind of all have that common goal, and you know where you're heading. So I think those are probably quite important.
Awesome. And then somebody just messaged me again. Would you ever consider representing somebody outside of the UK?
Yeah, of course.
Oh,
Yeah, I've actually had a couple conversations with a few guys that aren't in the UK
uh-huh.
about UK representation, and also maybe co-management too, because
Yeah.
I've spoken to people who have management companies in their country of residence, but then
Mm,
also co-partnering with a manager in a different area if you feel that their music is going, like, that's the next country, for
yeah.
example, like you're going to be going to and going to be pushing. So yeah, definitely, I'm always up for kind of working with new people, and it doesn't have to be UK based at all.
Awesome. And so that's not uncommon to have multiple managers in various, or having a manager in different countries.
I've not heard of it like too much,
Okay.
but I've definitely spoken to people who do it. Whether or not they call it management, it could be that you have a sole manager and then you have, for example, like US representation.
Yeah.
So people who might, come on board just for that. So
Country.
whether they could be, like, for example, they could be an American booking agent,
Mhm.
they could be an American PR company, or they could be another manager that wants to invest for that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Perfect. And then for anybody that might be interested in reaching out to you, where can they find you on social media? How can they get a hold of you? All that fun.
Sure. So all of the social media, if you just search Scarlet River Management, you'll find us there. I've got a website as well, which is www.scarletrivermanagement.com. And we have a contact page on there. And if you go to any of my socials, then you'll find kind of email addresses that you can email us at as well.
Awesome. Awesome. But I want to thank you again so much for sitting down and chatting. Like, this was a great conversation. This is like the first, like, I like trying to keep it very conversational, but I wanted to see how like a live Q&A type thing would work. And I think this went really well. So I'm really happy, and hopefully we'll get a chance to do it again. It's,
Yeah, it was great.
yeah,
Thank you so much for having me. And yeah, I really enjoyed it. It was
yeah,
fun.
absolutely, absolutely. And thank you everybody for paying it or tuning in. If you have any questions, feel free to leave it in the comment section below, and I'll try and get them over to Rachel, and we can kind of have that conversation, or you can reach out to her directly. Thank you everybody for tuning in, and we will see you later.